Good evening, everybody. I just want to take a few minutes to go over our lesson for Module 1A, our Pear Deck lesson. I won't do this for every lesson, but for this one I thought it was important because it is pretty fundamental and it's going to inform how you're going to proceed with your next assignment, which is a lesson plan that you'll have to plan, and then it'll be a learning segment, which is a set of 3 lesson plans. So for this module, we learned about what a name means, what labels mean. We saw a short film called Immersion, and we talked about how the teacher, how the students, the peers, or the principal could have addressed Moises's struggles. And we read a couple of articles on language and as well as a name, and it led us to thinking about deficit pedagogies in contrast with asset pedagogies, and I'll go over a few of those. So many of you have some experience with EBL students, which is great because that way you're already more or less aware of the population in Fresno or in the Central Valley, of course. But I want to skip over to first talking about immersion. And many of you had excellent responses. This is not a good view. Had excellent responses, but one of the things that I wanted to point out, and again is going to inform your next assignment, which is your lesson, is a lot of you rightfully pointed out that Moises could have gotten the help from his teacher in many different ways. For instance, the teacher could have asked Moises to go to the board and explain how he got his answer. You know, she kept insisting over and over to explain how he got the answer, but of course he can't do it. He couldn't do it in English. So another way that the teacher could have, sort of facilitate his involvement, his participation, or, encourage his voice is to invite him, for instance, to go up to the board and explain in Spanish, and perhaps a peer, and there were plenty of bilingual peers around, to interpret what Moises said. Another way that this could have, this disaster could have been prevented, of course, is by offering a bilingual assessment. But as you know, California had Proposition 227 about 20 years ago, which essentially banned bilingual education. And so students, teachers were not allowed to give out bilingual assessments. But luckily, in 2006, Proposition 58 reversed that, and now bilingual education is being expanded everywhere in California. So yes, another way that we could have helped Moises is, of course, getting the peers to help, maybe by sitting next to them, making sure that Moises has a bilingual buddy that can help him sort of navigate the school, the new environment. In terms of labels, if labels have no real meaning or no ideological sort of shift that accompany it, then maybe they don't matter. Labels only really matter and are meaningful when that ideological shift happens, right? Otherwise, it's just a very surface way of naming things. So I just wanted to address that very quickly. And I think as we go along, we can think about further how EBL can be an important naming practice for emerging bilinguals as opposed to ELL, because as Ofelia Garcia mentions and argues, you're sort of looking at your students from an asset perspective as opposed to from a deficit perspective. But again, that ideological shift has to happen first in order to really make that meaningful. One final thing that I wanted to add was this sort of deficit versus asset pedagogies. Deficit pedagogies are essentially what you saw in the video, right? Not giving the opportunity to students to express themselves, Moises couldn't express himself in English, so therefore he was silenced. And many kids could be, feel shut down or feel like they have nothing to contribute and therefore they won't. Asset pedagogies is thinking about, well, how could I have allowed Moises to participate during this time? Like I said before, having a bilingual buddy, inviting Moises to say how he got his answer in Spanish and then having someone interpret that for him. Right? Those are just an example of asset pedagogies. And later on, we'll be talking about translanguaging, as well as universal design for learning and culturally sustaining pedagogies, which are all asset pedagogies that we'll be learning more about. Deficit pedagogies, again, so any pedagogies that sees students as only English language learning, pedagogies that don't take into account the home language and the important role that it plays, pedagogies that don't take into account students' linguistic or cultural backgrounds, and that don't really give a choice to students, that really expect all students to have some sort of cookie cutter approach to their learning. So we'll be talking more about this as the days go by.